Chapter 6. Murderous Millinery. We have seen what a vast amount of quite preventable suffering is caused through the agency of the slaughterman who kills for a business and of the sportsman who kills for a pastime, the victims in either case being regarded as mere irrational automata with no higher destiny than to satisfy the most artificial wants or the most cruel caprices of mankind. A few words must now be said about the fur and feather traffic, the slaughter of mammals and birds for human clothing or human ornamentation, a subject connected on one hand with that of the flesh-eating and on the other, though to a less degree, with that of sport. What I shall say will of course have no reference to wool or any other substance which is obtainable without injury to the animal from which it is taken. Yeah, that's debatable. It is evident that in this case, as in the butchering trade, the responsibility for whatever wrongs are done must rest ultimately on the class which demands an unnecessary commodity rather than on the which is compelled by economic pressure to supply it. It is not the man who kills the bird, but the lady who wears the feathers in her hat who is the true offender. But here it will be asked, is the use of fur and feathers unnecessary? Now of course if we consider solely the present needs and tastes of society in regards to these matters, it must be admitted that a sudden, unexpected withdrawal of the numberless animal products on which our civilization depends would be a very serious embarrassment. The world, as alarmists point out to us, might have to go to bed without candles, and wake up to find itself without boots. It must be remembered, however, that such changes do not come about with suddenness, but on the contrary, with the extremest slowness imaginable, and a little thought will suggest what experience has already in many cases confirmed, that there is really no indispensable animal substance for which a substitute cannot be provided, when once there is sufficient demand from the vegetable or mineral kingdom. Take the case of leather for instance, a material which is in almost universal use, and may under present circumstances be fairly described as a necessary. But what should we do without leather was in fact a question very frequently asked of vegetarians during the early and callow days of the food reform movement, until it was found that vegetable leather could be successfully employed in boot making, and that the inconsistency of which vegetarians at present stand convicted is only a temporary and incidental one. Now of course, so long as oxen are slaughtered for food, their skins will be utilised in this way, but it is not difficult to foresee that the gradual discontinuance of the habit of flesh eating will lead to a similar gradual discontinuance of the use of hides, and that human ingenuity will not be at a loss in the provision of a substitute, so that it does not follow that a commodity which in the immediate sense is unnecessary now would be absolutely or permanently necessary under different conditions in the future. My sole reason for dwelling on this typical point is that I wish to guard myself by anticipation against a very plausible argument, by which discredit is often cast on the whole theory of animals' rights. What can be the subject, it is said, of entering on the sentimental path of an impossible humanitarianism, which only leads into insurmountable difficulties and dilemmas, inasmuch as the use of these various animal substances is so interwoven with the whole system of society that it can never be discontinued until society itself comes to an end. I assert that the case is by no means so desperate, that it is easy to make a right beginning now, and to foresee the lines along which future progress will be effected. Much that is impossible in our own time may be realised by those who come after us, as the natural and inevitable outcome of reforms which it now lies with us to inaugurate. This said, it may be freely admitted that, at the outset, humanitarians will do well to draw a practical distinction between such animal products as are converted to some genuine personal use, and those which are supplied for no better object than to gratify the idle whims of luxury or fashion. The when and the where are considerations of the greatest import in these questions. There is a certain fitness in the hunter, himself the product of a rough, wild era in human development, assuming the skins of the wild creatures he has conquered, but it does not follow, because an Eskimo, for example, may appropriately wear fur, or a Red Indian feathers, that this apparel will be equally becoming to the inhabitants of London or New York. On the contrary, an act which is perfectly natural in one case is often a sign of crass vulgarity in another. Hercules clothed triumphant in the spoils of the Nemean lion is a subject for a painter and a poet, but what if he had purchased the skin, ready dressed from a contemporary manufacturer. What we must unhesitatingly condemn is the blind and reckless barbarism which has ransacked and is ransacking whole provinces and continents without a glimmer of suspicion that the innumerable birds and quadrupeds which it is rapidly exterminating have any other part or purpose in nature than to be sacrificed to human vanity. That idle gentlemen and ladies may bedeck themselves, like certain characters in the fable, in borrowed skins and feathers. What care they for all the beauty and tenderness and intelligence of the varied forms of animal life? What is it to them whether these be helped forward by man in the universal progress and evolution of all living things, or whether whole species be transformed and degraded by way, boiled down like the beaver into a hat, or like the seal into a lady's jacket? Whatever it may be in other respects, the fur trade is, so far as it is, a supply of ornamental clothing for those who are under no necessity of wearing fur at all. It is barbarous and stupid business. It makes patchwork of, one may say, not only of the hides of its victims, but of the conscience and intellect of its supporters. A fur garment or trimming, we are told, appearing to the eye as if it were one uniform piece, is generally made up of many curiously shaped fragments. It is significant that a society which is enamoured of so many shams and fictions, which detests nothing so strongly as the need of looking facts in the face, should preeminently esteem those articles of apparel which are constructed on the most deceptive and illusionary principle. The story of the ass and the lion's skin is capable, it seems, of a new and wider application. But if the fur trade gives cause for serious reflection, what are we to say of the still more abominable trade in feathers? Murderous, indeed, is the millinery which finds its most fashionable ornament in the dead bodies of birds. Birds, the loveliest and most blithesome beings in nature. There is a pregnant remark made by a writer in the Encyclopaedia Britannica that to enumerate all the feathers used for ornamental purposes would be practically to give a complete list of all known and obtainable birds. The figures and details published by those humane writers who have raised an unavailing protest against this latest and worst crime of fashion are simply appalling in their stern and naked record of unremitting cruelty. One dealer in London is said to have received the single consignment of 32,000 dead hummingbirds, 80,000 aquatic birds and 800,000 pairs of wings. A Parisian dealer had a contract for 40,000 birds, and an army of murderers were turned out to supply the order. No less than 40,000 terns have been sent from Long Island in one season for millinery purposes. At one auction alone in London were sold 404,389 West Indian and Brazilian bird skins and 356,389 East Indian, besides thousands of pheasants and birds of paradise. The meaning of such statistics is simply that the women of Europe and America have given an order for the ruthless extermination of birds. It is not seriously contended in any quarter that this wholesome destruction, effected often in the most revolting and heartless manner, is capable of excuse or justification, yet the efforts of those who address themselves to the better feelings of the offenders appear to meet little or no success. The cause of this failure must undoubtedly be sought in the general lack of any clear conviction that animals have rights, and the evil will never be thoroughly remedied until not only this particular abuse, but all such abuses, and the prime source from which such abuses originate, have been subjected to an impartial criticism. In saying this, I do not, of course, mean to imply that special effort should not be directed against special cruelties. I have already remarked that the main responsibility for the daily murders which fashionable millinery has instigated must lie at the doors of those who demand, rather than those who supply, these hideous and funeral ornaments. Unfortunately, the process, like that of slaughtering cattle, is throughout delegated to other hands than those of the ultimate purchaser, so that it is exceedingly difficult to bring home a due sense of blood guiltiness to the right person. The confirmed sportsman or amateur butcher at least sees with his own eyes the circumstances attendant on his sport, and the fact that he feels no compunction in pursuing it is due, in most cases, to obtuseness or confusion of the moral faculties. But many of those who wear sealskin mantles or feathered debauched bonnets are naturally humane enough. They are misled by pure ignorance and thoughtlessness, and would at once abandon such practices if they could be made aware of the methods employed in the wholesale massacre of seals or hummingbirds. Still, it remains true that all these questions ultimately hang together, and no complete solution will be found for any one of them until the whole problem of our moral relation towards the lower animals is studied with far greater comprehensiveness. For this reason, it is perhaps unscientific to assert that any particular form of cruelty to animals is worse than any other form. The truth is that each of these hydra heads, the offspring of the parent stem, has its own proper characteristic and is different, not worse or better than the rest. To flesh eating belongs the proud distinction of causing a greater bulk of animal suffering than any other habit whatsoever. To sport, the meed of unique and unparalleled brutality, while the patrons of Murderous Millinery afford the most marvellous instance of the capacity the human mind possesses for ignoring its personal responsibilities. To reapply Keats' words, "You kill a paddy bird," says an Indian proverb, "and what do you get? A handful of feathers." Unfortunately, commerce has now taught the natives of India that a handful of feathers is not without its value. It is well that ladies should pledge themselves to a rule of not wearing feathers, but that is an ominous exception that permits them to wear the feathers of birds killed for food. It is such inconsistencies that an anonymous satirist makes a reference in the following lines. When Edwin sat down to dine one night, with piteous grief his heart was newly stricken. In vain did Angelina him invite, Grace said, to carve the chicken. 1,000 songs stood slaughtered in one day. O Angelina, meditate upon it, and henceforth never, never wear, I pray, a redbreast in thy bonnet. Fair Angelina did not scold nor scowl, no word she spake, she better knew her lover, but from ample dish of roasted fowl she gently raised a cover, and lo, the saviour of that tender bird, the tender Edwin's appetite did quicken. He started by a new emotion stirred, said grace, and carved the chicken. For them the Ceylon diver held his breath, and went all naked to the hungry shark. For them his ears gushed blood, for them in death. The seal on the cold ice with piteous bark lay full of darts, for them alone did seethe. 1,000 men in troubles, wide and dark, half ignorant they turned an easy wheel, that set sharp racks at work, to pinch and peel.